Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to react to one of my older videos that I recorded 4 years ago already, and that was at the time one of my most successful videos, and I think it just hit a topic that was really interesting at the time. And the video is why windfoil cannot claim the windsurfing world speed record. And yeah, I didn't watch this video in years now, so I don't exactly remember everything I said in this video, so I think it's going to be fun to go over the video, see if I still agree with all my statements, and actually see how the windfoiling in contrast to the fin has developed over the last 4 years. So let's get started, let's head into the video, let's go. So the other day I saw on the social media that Nicolas uploaded a session onto the windfoil website. Okay, the first thing already is, I'm gonna be stopping a lot I guess. It's like, it looks so young in this video. It's kind of strange to see yourself, which is kind of the thing with YouTube. If you watch your old videos, it's kind of funny that you see a version of yourself from a few years ago. With this Fanatic shirt, I remember I really loved this Fanatics shirt. I think it was like their 40-year anniversary edition, and the sound effect with Goya flying through the picture is kind of ridiculous but funny. But yeah, let's not stop every few seconds. Where he did 34.23 knots on 500 meter on his windfoil equipment, with the peak speed being 36.79 knots on the windfoil, and this is a new unofficial world record on the foil gear. Okay, that's pretty interesting because the foil got a lot faster since then, but one thing that hasn't changed is that Nicolas Goya is still on top of the kind of speed thing, like he's still the fastest guy in the foiling. So let's actually head over to the GPS foil surfing website and see where we stand now in terms of the speeds. So I'm just gonna open it now. Because yeah, it's 4 years ago and the sport was still pretty young, so we would expect some development in this time frame over 4 years. So let's head over here to the overall ranking on GPS speed foiling. I like this website because it's like only foiling and not mixed with a fin, so I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, we can see here on the ranking of all time of all the windfoil sessions that Nicolas Goya is still on top with 39.92 knots, and the speed we see here is the average of 5 runs of 10 seconds. So what is his actual max speed and 500 meter? The max speed is 41.91 knots. So the other one in the old video was 36. So actually in these 4 years, windfoiling has come up from 36 all the way to almost 42 knots in top speed. And the 500 has increased from 34 to 39 knots. So also by around 5 knots, which is kind of interesting. And I think like Pierre Mortefond has also hit 40 knots. We can see him in second place. Thomas Goya is up there. There's some guys who are close or over 40 knots. So yeah, certainly there has been a lot of development, but let's continue this video and see if I kind of revise my statement that I don't believe the windfoiling can claim the world record. So today I thought it would be super interesting to compare the foil speeds with the regular windsurf speeds when it comes to speed surfing and figure out if the foil has the potential to one day claim the world record on windsurf or even the overall world record in sailing, or what is holding back foiling at the moment. So yeah, I love this montage here of like my fastest kind of foiling and my fastest kind of windsurfing, which at the time, like what is my actual top speed here? 49, 50, 51. I think I hit already 30 knots back then. Interesting that I was already going so fast back then because I haven't improved that much from that time. But yeah, this was kind of the question. If windfoil, being such a young discipline, can like come up in the next few years back then to claim the windsurfing world record, but like the record still stands. The record from Antoine Albo that I mentioned in this video is still the same. No one has beaten it since then. It still stands at 53 point something. While foiling has come up a little bit, but it's still like the 500 meter we see here. Of course, that's not in a channel. It's like 39 knots, but the windsurfing one is still 53 over 500 meters. So the windfoiling has kind of come closer, but only by 5 knots, and it is still 14 knots away. So of the 19 it needed to achieve, it has gained like 5 knots. But yeah, let's continue. So when foils first hit the windsurf market a couple years back, I thought for sure that the foils would have the potential to go a lot faster than regular windsurf gear, because obviously the board is not touching the water and therefore the drag by the board disappears completely. But then once I tried it myself, I saw that the speeds were actually not going up, but I was slower on the windfoil equipment than on my regular windsurf equipment. And let's figure out why that is. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point I'm making here, because like at first it seems like the foil should be faster just because you don't have the board touching the water, so you don't have the friction of the board on the water that slows you down a lot. So in theory, like it kind of makes sense that you like would think that the foil is just faster, which it is, but it depends on how you view it, because if we're talking about purely like top speed, the fin still has the big advantage. And even in sailing, foiling has not taken the world records. And what the foil is really, really good at is racing, like slalom racing, course racing, this kind of stuff. Because over a course, the foil is for sure faster now, because you have a much more consistent average speed. Like, of course, if you're touching with your board the water in every wave, you're slowing down every wave. So only when you find this perfect stretch of water, you can actually hit those kind of speeds over 40 knots. Whereas in foiling, you kind of keep your average speed very consistent because the board is never touching the water and the drag from the foil stays more or less consistent, of course, depending on the height you ride the foil at. So the more mass that's in the water, obviously you have a little bit more friction. The less mass that's in the water, you have a little bit less friction and are going a little bit faster, but it's not as dramatic as it is in fin windsurfing. So I feel there's the misconception when people say foil is faster. Yes, on a course for like slalom or racing, but actually like the top speed, when we're really talking about speed surfing and records, the fin has an advantage by miles still. Like I said, 14 knots. And I still believe it's nothing the foil can really achieve. And I'm going to explain later why I think that. So as I've said, Nicolas Goyard did a run of 34.2 knots on 500 meter on windfoil equipment. And obviously that is a very long way off from the official windsurf world record, which currently stands at over 53 knots by Antoine Albaut, with Vincent Falconer being the fastest man on the maximum speed, with I believe 56 knots on the max speed. And obviously it is even harder to get more speed after a certain point, because the power you need to get to go faster, the faster you go, actually doesn't increase linear, but it's actually more like an exponential growth. So 34 knots is a very long way off from the current world record of 53 knots on the 500 meter. Yeah, interesting, because all those records are still the same. Vincent is still the fastest guy on 2 seconds. Antoine is still has the world record, even though Vincent came very close again since then. But all the same, and yes, like I explained here, going from 39 to 53 knots is such a long way off that, yeah, it's not realistic that like we can achieve this. And if you think, like now these last 4 years, foiling was still kind of in its early stages. So you would expect the most development to happen there. And there was a lot of development, but like the basic thing, how the foil works, didn't change over these last years, because it's still a T-foil. Like everything still works the same. Mostly everyone still has the fuse, the wings, the mast separate, that you can like kind of interchange the parts. And what has gotten better is like kind of the quality of the foil. So that you have stiffer foils that have less drag just by having thinner profiles. So you have a lot more stability on the foils now and can push more with thinner profiles, so you can go a little bit faster. But there's a limit on how thin you can make these materials to still work. Also, we saw that the wing sizes of like the front and back wings have decreased a lot over the last 4 years. And yeah, but there's, I think, a limit to how small and thin you can make everything, so that it's not getting unstable with the materials we have. So I think over the next 4 years, we're not gonna see an increase of another 5 knots with the current materials and like how currently the foil is working. So in my opinion, there's 2 key aspects that determine how fast a windsurfer can go. The first one being how much energy can you actually take out of the wind and convert into forward momentum. And then the second factor, I believe, is the drag. How much of the power that you take out from the wind and convert into forward momentum is actually transferred into forward momentum and not lost to drag. And these are, I think, the 2 aspects that play together when going fast. And at the moment, in both aspects, I think that the windsurf gear, the regular windsurf gear on fin, has the advantage over the wind foil gear. And let's look at why that is. Let's look actually at the drag first. So when it comes to wind foiling, there's two kinds of drag when you go on the foil. There is induced drag, which is the drag that is created by the two wings which work against each other. So the forward wing actually lifts the board and the back wing is the stabilizer that makes the whole system stable enough so that you can ride it. And the lift created by this foil system is actually called the induced drag. The other kind of drag is the profile drag, which is actually the drag created by the profile of the foil. So first let's take a look at the induced drag and how the foil actually creates the lift. So what you could do theoretically, if this is the forward wing, you could put it at an angle that is creating the lift, and then you can use the back wing and put it downward so that this one will go push the foil down, while this one will push the foil up, just by giving both wings an angle of attack. But this actually is not the smartest solution if you want to go fast, because this will give a lot of induced drag. So what you can do, instead of giving the wings both a great angle of attack, you can actually create the wings, both of them, asymmetrically, meaning that the shape of the wing on the upper side and on the lower side is not symmetrical. And this is basically the same principle that is used on an airplane wing or even an asymmetrical speed fin. Yeah, this is kind of funny to watch now for me, because I am using now the Patrick Ion foil, and I guess it's a good advertisement for them, even though I'm not getting anything from Patrick. But exactly this was the kind of problem with the first wings, that they were the first foils, that they were very unstable. And what we see now is that the wings themselves are not put into the foil with a big angle, but that you get all the lift of the front wing from the profile of the wing. And actually these two wings working against each other, Patrick has realized that it creates a lot of turbulence. So you can even see on the Patrick foil, like the direction of the foils in which way they are bent are the same direction now. The profile is still reversed. But yeah, I think what I'm saying here was very much what was kind of the problem in the first kind of foils, and which created a lot of instability in making them hard to ride, which resulted in lower speeds. It's actually funny, I put so many graphics in here, so back then I really didn't know how to do that well. So it's I think I put a lot of effort into that video, and yeah, I think it's still a cool video. Let's continue. So if you have an asymmetrical wing, same like on an airplane wing, for example, on the upper side of the foil, the water, or on an airplane, the wind, has to make a longer way over the wing compared to the downward side. It will create the low pressure on the upside of the wing because the water has to move faster, and this will give the lift as the foil tends to move towards this side with a lower pressure. So now, instead of giving both the front wing and the stabilizer a big angle of attack, you can actually put them relatively at the same angle and create the lift on the wings by giving the wings an asymmetrical shape. And this is actually what most foil producers nowadays do. I think almost every brand that sells foils has asymmetrical front wings. Some still have symmetrical back wings, but by giving the back wing also an asymmetrical shape, you can put the wings at a lower angle of attack and therefore reduce the induced drag. So the amount of lift on a foil that you need to keep flying actually stays the same throughout the whole speed range. So the amount of lift when you go 5 knots is the same amount of lift you will need when you go 30 knots on the foil. Meaning the induced drag doesn't increase with speed, it actually stays the same. But what happens, of course, when you go 5 knots, the water over the wing flows over the wing with 5 knots. So when you go 30 knots, the water flows over the wing with 30 knots, which is 6 times the amount of 5 knots. So if you keep the same foil with the same angle of attack from 5 knots to 30 knots, you will actually have 6 times the amount of lift if you go 30 knots compared to 5 knots. And this actually is a big problem. Yeah, this is kind of a problem to go really fast with the foil, because like I say here, the faster you go, the more lift the foil actually creates, because the water is flowing over the profile faster. And so what happens is, when you're like trying to pump onto the foil to go planing, you put the whole foil at an angle basically and push it out of the water. And then you kind of level out the foil the faster you go. But then kind of once you're level, the faster you go, the more pressure you have. So what you see in foiling, the faster that people go, the more they move their body weight forward on the foil to kind of counter that and push down the foil. So it is not kind of the same position that you have depending on various speeds. Like I will put some footage here of me riding. When I'm at full speed, I need to put so much weight on my front foot to keep the foil down. And I think this is still a problem because this really messes up kind of your balance, and you don't have this, for example, on the fin. So I think this is one key factor that's limiting the speed of the foil, because you still need to be able to pump out the foil out of the water and get flying, but then you don't kind of want to have so much lift as you go fast. And one thing to counter this is to use fuselages that have the front wing further back, so that the lift that it creates is like at a point further back on the board, so that you don't need to put your body weight as much forward as if you're aiming for speed. And most brands have different fuselages, like for slalom, where you want a little bit more power, for speed, that have the pressure point a little bit further back, where you have higher speed potential. But yeah, this is still pretty much accurate now. So let's say that you design a speed foil that is supposed to go 40 knots. So you calculate the areas of the foil and the lift they create for going 40 knots. But of course you need to get the foil and the whole system flying. And now when you go 10 knots, you only have 1/4 of the lift that you have when going 40 knots. So it will be really, really hard to get the foil started. So either you need a variable system where, let's say, when you start flying, you have a greater angle of attack, which is dynamically reduced as you go faster, or you have to go really fast before takeoff. Now let's look at the second type of drag when foiling, which is the profile drag. And I believe the profile drag is the bigger part of the problem when trying to go faster on the wind foil. Because as of right now, we only have those T-foils. The T-foils are with the mast, the front wing, the back wing, and the fuselage. And all these parts which are in the water create profile drag, and this profile drag, as I've said in the beginning, increases exponentially as you go faster. And the profile drag on regular windsurf gear obviously behaves the same. It also increases exponentially with higher speed, but obviously this is a 21 centimeter fin, which is all that is in the water with the tail of the board. And obviously this 21 centimeter fin, which is also quite narrow, doesn't create a whole lot of drag, which is why the regular windsurf gear can go over 50 knots these days. But the profile drag on a foil is much higher because you have more parts in the water. Yeah, like I said earlier, this is kind of the progress that the foils made over the last few years, is that the profiles became thinner, so they have less profile drag, and they got a little bit more stable along with that. But yeah, this kind of lower profile drag allows us to go a little bit faster now compared to 4 years ago, where we didn't have foils with these kind of thin parts on the foil, being the mast, the wings, and the fuselage. And obviously you cannot create these parts as thin as you can create a fin, because in order for the foil to be stable, the parts need to be really stiff. And if you build it too narrow, the whole foil will not be stiff enough to keep control at high speeds. And I think here lies a big problem which limits the speed of the foils nowadays. Also in regular wind speed surfing, not a whole lot of the board is actually touching the water while speed surfing, because the top guys, what they manage to do is really start to get the board flying, and thus they only have around maybe the last 30 or 40 centimeters of the board actually touching the water while speed surfing. And this on a narrow speed board is not a whole lot of wetted surface area. So this is a reason that only this little area combined with the area of the fin produce the profile drag, which is a lot less than on a foil nowadays. Yeah, still the same. Like the foil has to carry the whole weight and the kind of pressure from the front and back wing, so the mast cannot be as thin as you can make a speed surfing fin, for example. So there you have a lot of drag. But what is interesting is that for a long time I have thought that these T-foils are not the fastest there is in foiling, that the L-foils that we saw a lot in yacht racing would actually be faster. But then just the other week we actually saw a new speed record in the Sail GP, and I kind of like to look at these boat classes because there's a lot more money in there in this kind of industry. So they have more budget to design more high-tech equipment basically. And what really surprised me is that in the SailGP class, they actually just recently broke the speed record of these boats, like just in a training session, and they did 102 kilometers an hour. But what was super kind of interesting for me is that they used a T-foil for this, where they were previously on L-foils. So I would have thought that the L-foils would actually be faster than the T-foils, but they switched onto the T-foils and immediately broke the speed record. And the reason they gave why this foil is faster was super interesting, because they said that they can get more stability on a T-foil compared to the L-foils they had previously on these boats. And what did they do? They actually built the whole foil out of titanium. And this is kind of really interesting, because a lot of foil brands now use, for example, for the fuse, they use titanium as well. So this could be like a kind of way to make thinner profiles with more stability and get the speeds up. If it works in SailGP, it should work in windsurfing as well. But still, we're talking about like just reducing the profile drag a little bit and creating more stable foils. But what I previously thought, that there would be still another way to get foiling in windsurfing by using, for example, L-foils, I now think maybe the T-foils are faster, because if they're faster in SailGP, why wouldn't it be the same in windsurfing? So even more than 5 years ago, I believe now that the wind foil cannot break the overall windsurfing world record. We're not even talking about the overall sailing record that's more than 10 knots higher than the windsurfing world record. Because now I feel like we are already at a stage where we have done a lot of development on the foils, sails, masts. Everything is a lot more high-tech than it was 4 years ago. And we still only increased by 5 knots. So I would think in the next 5 years, we maybe increase by another 2 or 3 knots. Maybe someone, if we do this video again in 4 years, will have hit 45 knots. But I would think that the kind of improvements in the speed now will become like much less and less and less over the next years. Alright, the second aspect that determines how fast you can go on the windsurf gear is how much energy of the wind force that is in your sail can you actually convert into forward momentum. But before we get into this part of the video, it would be super cool if you could check out my channel and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. I have a whole lot of videos around speed surfing, foiling, slalom sailing, and all this good stuff, so make sure to check it out. Funny to look at this old footage. But now let's get back into the video. So when it comes to how much energy from your sail the speed surfer can actually convert into forward momentum, I believe that also the regular windsurf gear currently has the edge of the windfoil gear. And the reason for that is that the whole foil system is more or less unstable while riding. The foils are getting better and better these days, they are more stable, and the riders are actually getting better as they progress through the years on the windfoil. Yep, exactly, this happened. We see that the kind of riding style has changed a lot over the last 4 years. I recently did a video on how to go over 30 knots on foil, and there you can actually see the kind of technique really in depth. But basically what has happened is that people are using a lot longer harness lines, and they're kind of hanging under their boom, and the knees are bent, where in fin windsurfing they are really straight if you want to go fast. And this allows us to get much more control over the foil now, with less of this up and down movement. So yeah, like I said back then, I would think the technique kind of naturally improves, and this is exactly what happened as well. But I believe that at the moment, the windsurf gear is just easier to ride, and thus the speed surfers on the regular windsurf gear find a better position on their gear than they can find on windfoil. Actually, if you look at this clip here from Antoine Albo, which I took about, I think, 3 months back, where he's windfoiling in 30 knots, the position he's in is really not looking too stable, and he's really not looking too comfortable, and he is one of the best, or maybe at the moment the best speed surfer in the world. And if he is struggling to keep a good stance on the windfoil gear, we can say for sure that the amount of energy a speed surfer can convert on a regular windsurf gear is higher than it is on a windfoil gear. Yeah, in the strong wind, the windfoil has actually come up a lot. Like we see in racing now, foils are even superior in slalom racing in 30-35 knots, whereas 4 years ago this was not the case at all. because like I said before, the foils have gotten better, the riders adapted their technique. But still, I would say what I say here holds true, that like the fin windsurfing stance is just more efficient at putting pressure on the board and converting the power from the wind into forward momentum than the foiling is. But another thing that I didn't mention here is that in wind foiling you can actually get away with using much smaller sails. You don't need to have as much power to get the board free like in fin windsurfing for the foil, because once you're up, you require less power from the sail to actually keep the foil up and go fast. And then actually the smaller sail a lot of times is faster. So this is a big advantage, that you can use smaller sails in the kind of the same wind, like around 1.5 square meters smaller, I would say. And obviously the smaller sail is always faster, it has less drag. So that's actually an advantage. But what I say here, I think still holds true. So at the moment, I believe that those two things really limit the foil speed. And in my opinion, I think that the foils as they are right now cannot surpass the windsurf gear when it comes to speed, and will not have the edge when it comes to claiming the official world record in the next years. Yeah, I think another reason is because these kind of speed canals where the world records are done, like in Lüderitz for fin windsurfing, it's not possible to foil there. Yeah, the water depth is only like 30 centimeters deep, so the foiling masts are like 95 centimeters to 1 meter, 1 meter 10, so it's not possible to foil in these speed canals that we currently have. So it would be kind of interesting if they build a speed canal with like a depth of 1.5 meters, how fast people could actually go in a speed canal. But I think the speed would not improve as much as it would in fin windsurfing, because like foils can handle a little bit of drop. It's not as big of a problem compared to fin windsurfing, where you really only go really fast if you have really flat water. But I think one thing which is really important to consider is, as of right now, we only have one kind of wind foils on the market, which are the T-foils with the mast, the fuselage, and the front wing and the stabilizers. But if you look at other areas that use foils, for example sailing, T-foils are not the only foils that are on the market. For example, there are L-foils on the market, which are basically foils that just go straight out of the ship. And I believe if we want to achieve a higher speed with foiling than with regular windsurf gear, we have to look at different foils and experiment a bit more. Because as of right now, all the manufacturers only produce T-foils for windsurfing. And I think a big reason why that is like it is at the moment is that these T-foils are the most stable when it comes to windsurfing and are still controllable by a rider. But if we look at other boats, like for example the America's Cup boats, they have 4 foils, those are catamarans, and they have 2 foils in the middle of the ship, on each side of the ship, and also they have foils on the back of the ship where the rudder is. So while sailing, the 2 leeward foils produce lift, while the foil on the windward side of the ship is actually up, while the foil on the windward side where the rudder is actually adjusted to produce downward pressure. So the 2 lee foils on those boats create lift, while one foil is creating downward pressure. And these rigs seem to be really stable, but they are also controlled by computers while sailing, so this is why they are so stable. And these boats are capable of reaching, I think, up to 50 knots. So the question is, can we convert something like this to a windsurf board? Yeah, like I said just 2 minutes ago, there has been a lot of development in that. And actually there's T-foils being introduced now in the sailing classes that seem to be faster. So like this kind of thesis that I have here is not really accurate anymore. And now I don't really think that L-foils can massively improve anything in windsurfing, and maybe that T-foils are even faster. I don't know. But I've seen something interesting actually. Antoine Albo, he made a post a couple months back that he's working with a team of engineers and a whole lot of people, and his plan is to gain the official world sailing record, so not just the windsurf record, but the overall sailing record back. And this currently stands at over 65 knots, I think, while the windsurf record is only at 53 knots. So he hasn't said with what kind of equipment he plans to do that, but obviously with regular windsurf equipment like it is right now, it is not possible to go that fast. The windsurf record can maybe be broken, I believe, but only by like a couple tenths of a knot or maybe 1 knot, but I don't think that we can go much faster on regular windsurf gear. So I think he has something planned which evolves around foils, But obviously I don't think that this will be a T-foil and that they will come up with something in the future. Yeah, whatever has happened to this Zephyr project? Like, I didn't know it was already 4 years ago that they started it, but I don't know, I haven't heard a lot from it in the last couple of months or years, so I have no idea if they still have some plan to do something in that regards, if they're missing money or whatever. It would be interesting if they're still actively working on some kind of system to break the windsurfing world record. But it's gotten really quiet around that, so that's kind of interesting that I mention it here. So it will be really interesting to follow that and see if I'm right and the development with which he plans to actually break this world record will be on foil. Of course, if something new comes up, I will keep you posted on this channel. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to not miss anything. And I'll see you in the next video. Yeah, pretty cool to watch this old video of myself now from 4 years ago. And yeah, kind of interesting also that a lot of what I'm saying here still holds true now. And actually that I was also right about a few things in this video. I'm obviously would have been kind of funny if the world record would have been broken now a few years after I made this video, but this still hasn't happened. Who knows? It might still happen. We will see what the future will bring and what developments we can expect over the next few years in wind foiling. It certainly is very interesting at the moment with both It certainly is very interesting at the moment with foil windsurfing for sure being the superior class in windsurfing at the moment when it comes to like speed over a race course and slalom course. But yeah, thanks guys for watching this video. I hope you kind of enjoyed this me going over my old video kind of style video. If you did, I will see you for the next one, which will actually be a vlog from Switzerland. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.